The desert sun burned like a relentless torch, baking the ground until it cracked beneath the boots of men who hadn't stopped moving for days. A thin haze of dust clung to the air, making every breath feel like swallowing ash. And in that silence, the kind that comes right before death, the SEAL team crouched behind a jagged wall, their rifles trembling in tired hands. 2 mags left, one whispered, his voice breaking through the radio's static. Same here, came another reply, muffled and dry. The men were spread thin, pinned between ruins, and an open field that stretched out like a trap. The enemy had them boxed in, shadows moving through distant ridges like wolves circling their prey. Every second felt heavier than the last. The sound of boots crunching gravel somewhere out there sent a chill through the team leader's spine. They'd fought hard, held their ground longer than anyone thought possible. But even elite warriors know when the odds are against them. A deep breath. A prayer whispered under breath. Somewhere, one of them fingered a photo tucked into his vest. A child's drawing of a stick-figure dad holding hands with a smiling face. He stared at it for a moment too long, as if it could bring him home. "Stay low," their commander muttered, scanning the horizon. His voice was steady, but his eyes told a different story. This wasn't a fight they were going to win. Not without help. Then came the static over their headset. A calm voice. Female. Professional. Hog 1 on station. Eyes on you, boys. Sit tight. Every head lifted. Hope flickered like a dying flame catching a breeze. Miles above, hidden in the glare of the sun, an A-10 Thunderbolt carved a slow circle in the sky. Her canopy glinted gold. Her pilot's gloved hand gripping the throttle with quiet determination. She had the voice of someone who had seen enough battles to know fear well, but never let it control her. She studied her HUD, scanning for enemy positions. Her heart raced, but her breathing stayed calm, trained and precise. She knew these men on the ground were seconds from being overrun. She also knew her aircraft. An old beast nicknamed the Warthog was the only thing standing between them and a battlefield grave. The radio crackled again. "They've got us surrounded," came the SEAL commander's voice, low and urgent. "We can't hold much longer." Her jaw tightened. She could hear the gunfire in the background, sharp bursts echoing through the comms. She flipped a switch, arming the GU-8 Avenger cannon beneath her aircraft, the monstrous rotary gun that could shred steel in seconds. The rumble of the jet deepened, like a predator baring its teeth. "Copy that," she said, voice steady. "Mark your position. Stay low. I'm coming in." The SEALs scrambled, pulling smoke grenades from their vests and tossing them into the open. A plume of bright orange smoke curled upward, marking their location against the scorched earth. The sound of enemy fire intensified. Closer now, much closer. One of the SEALs muttered under his breath, "If she doesn't get here soon," he didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. And then, faint at first, came the roar. A deep, thunderous growl that grew louder with every passing second. Heads turned skyward as a dark silhouette broke through the haze. She came in low, lower than anyone expected. The A-10 cut through the air like a blade, wings wide, engines howling. The beast wasn't fast, but it was terrifying, built to strike fear into anyone foolish enough to stand their ground. Hog 1 cleared hot. Her voice crackled through. The SEAL commander's heart pounded. "Copy. Bring the rain." She lined up her sights, fingers steady on the trigger. Her breathing slowed, her world narrowing down to a single moment. Guns, guns, guns. The cannon erupted with a deafening roar, spitting a stream of 30mm shells at thousands of rounds per minute. The sound was unlike anything else, a ripping, thunderous scream that rattled bones. Dirt and fire exploded across the battlefield as enemy positions were torn apart, their gunfire silenced in seconds. The SEALs hunkered down, covering their ears as shock waves rolled over them. Smoke and dust filled the air, the smell of gunpowder thick and choking. When they dared to look up, the sky was alive with streaks of fire. "Holy," one of them muttered, eyes wide with awe. "She's an angel." But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Through the smoke, enemy reinforcements scrambled, desperate to regroup. A rocket streaked upward, missing her jet by inches. Her voice came over the radio again, calm but urgent. Heads down. I'm making another pass. The SEALs pressed themselves into the dirt, their hearts pounding as the A-10 banked hard, circling back like a hawk. She could see the enemy moving, hear her own pulse hammering in her ears. She thought briefly of her father, a veteran pilot who'd taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. She leveled out, lining up her next strike. Her gloved fingers tightened on the controls. She whispered to herself, "Not today." The cannon roared again, louder this time, the sound vibrating through the earth. Enemy trucks burst into flames. Ammunition stockpiles erupted in fiery explosions. The battlefield transformed into chaos, the kind only an A-10 could unleash. The SEALs exchanged looks of disbelief. Hope surged through them for the first time all day. "Keep your heads down," their commander shouted. "She's clearing the map." Above, her face was set in grim focus, eyes tracking every target, every flicker of movement. She flew low enough that the ground blurred beneath her, the smell of burning fuel even reaching her cockpit through the vents. Another rocket whooshed past her wing, close enough to make her flinch. Her warning alarm screamed, but she didn't pull back. Not yet. She had one last pass in her. And as she pulled up hard, banking into the sun, the battlefield below erupted into silence. The eerie kind of silence that comes only when death has passed over and left nothing standing. The SEALs looked up, stunned, their ears still ringing. They saw her jet, a dark silhouette against the sun, circling back one more time. The commander keyed his mic, his voice hoarse but steady. "You just saved our lives." She didn't respond right away. Her eyes scanned the field, ensuring there were no more threats. Finally, her voice came through, calm, almost gentle. "Not yet. Stay low. This isn't over." And with that, she dove again. The jet trembled beneath her hands as she banked hard, the horizon tilting sharply until the desert below looked like a cracked, sun-bleached canvas. Her helmet visor reflected a swirl of fire and smoke from the battlefield. In her chest, her heart hammered like the roar of her engines, but her face stayed calm, cold, focused. Years of training had taught her that emotion came later. For now, she was the storm. Her call sign, Hog 1, blinked green on the radio panel. She had been flying A-10 Thunderbolts for 7 years now. She loved the old bird, the kind of plane that could take a hit and keep flying, a beast designed to protect the soldiers below. She'd seen friends not make it home. She'd sworn that if she could stop it, no one under her watch would meet that fate. "Coming around," she murmured, her voice steady despite the chaos below. The GAU, 8 Avenger cannon beneath her belly still smoked, the scent of gunpowder and burning oil thick in the cockpit. She flipped switches with practiced precision, every movement as smooth as breathing. Far below, the SEAL team clung to life. The commander crouched low behind a crumbling wall, scanning the smoke-filled distance through his rifle's scope. His men were still alive, though barely. They exchanged glances, silent but heavy with gratitude. That plane above wasn't just an aircraft, it was salvation. "Reload," one whispered, his hands trembling as he slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle. The sound of enemy shouts echoed faintly, carried on the dry wind. They weren't done yet. The enemy was regrouping. "Stay sharp," the commander ordered. "They'll push again." Up in the sky, she could see it too, heat signatures swarming like ants on her targeting screen. They'd scattered at her first attack, but now they were regrouping. Trucks moved into position, weapons flashing. She zoomed in, her gloved fingers flicking controls with precision. Her jaw tightened. She remembered her father's words, spoken long ago before she'd ever set foot in a cockpit. If you can make a difference, even for one life, you fight like hell for it. That memory burned in her chest now. She keyed the mic. "Command, I've got multiple targets moving in. Requesting clearance for another strike." The reply was immediate, urgent. "Cleared hot, Hog 1. Clear the field. They're counting on you." She didn't need reminding. She'd heard the edge in those soldiers' voices. She'd seen this too many times. Men who'd already accepted death whispering their final prayers. "Roger that," she said softly, pulling back on the throttle. The engines roared as she climbed, banking high into the blazing sun. The ground fell away beneath her, and for a moment, the sky was hers alone. The A-10 was a machine built for this. Its engine screamed like thunder. Its wings stretched wide like the arms of a predator. She leveled out and dove again, the nose of her plane aimed squarely at the battlefield below. The HUD lit up with enemy positions. She lined up her shot. Guns, guns, guns. The cannon erupted. The earth shook. The sound was deafening, a rip of thunder that rolled through the desert, drowning out every other noise. The SEALs ducked as a storm of fire tore through enemy lines, explosions lighting the horizon. The smell of burning diesel filled the air as vehicles erupted in flames. She's tearing them apart. One SEAL muttered in awe, unable to look away. But then, a warning alarm screamed inside her cockpit. A missile lock. Her heartbeat spiked. She yanked the stick, banking hard, the jet groaning as she skimmed low over the terrain. The missile streaked past, exploding in the distance with a thunderous boom. "Missile fired," she reported, voice steady but clipped. "I'm braking left." The jet shook violently as she threw it into a sharp turn, dust swirling up in her wake. Another missile shot from the tree line, this one closer. She dropped flares, bright bursts of light streaking behind her as the missile veered off, exploding harmlessly in the sky. "Close one," she whispered under her breath, gripping the controls tighter. The SEAL commander watched from below, heart in his throat. "She's dodging missiles out there," he muttered, more to himself than his men. "She's risking everything for us." "Why doesn't she pull back?" one of his soldiers asked, voice cracking with fear and awe. The commander didn't answer. He knew the truth. She wouldn't stop until they were safe. Coming back around, her voice came through the comms, calm but unshakable. The men looked at each other in disbelief. "She's coming back," one of them muttered. "Yeah," the commander said softly, a note of admiration in his voice. "She's coming back." In the cockpit, her focus sharpened. She scanned the terrain for the source of those missiles. Enemy gunners were repositioning, preparing for another shot. She locked them in. She thought of her brother, an infantryman lost years ago in a battle not so different from this. He hadn't made it home because air support had been too far away that day. She'd joined the Air Force because of him, because she'd sworn no one else would have to wait for help that never came. Her lips pressed into a firm line as she angled her jet for another run. "Not today," she whispered. She squeezed the trigger. The cannon roared. Flames ripped through the enemy's position, explosions lighting the field like fireworks. The SEALs covered their ears, the shock waves rattling their bones. "She's clearing the map," someone breathed, eyes wide with awe. When the smoke cleared, silence hung heavy over the desert. The SEAL team remained crouched, ears ringing, breaths coming hard. They could see the sky above, the A-10 circling low like a guardian angel. Then her voice came over the radio again, soft but commanding. "Stay put. I'm not done yet." And with a roar, she climbed again, disappearing into the sun. But for the first time, doubt flickered in her mind. Her fuel was dropping fast. Her ammo wasn't infinite. And every time she dove low, she risked becoming a target herself. She gripped the controls tighter, scanning the battlefield again. There were still enemy forces out there. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Far below, the SEAL commander exhaled shakily, wiping sweat and dust from his face. "She's risking her life for us," he muttered. "Why?" one of the younger SEALs asked. The commander looked at him, voice low but certain. "Because she's one of us." Up in the sky, she set her jaw, adjusted her helmet, and prepared for another pass. The sound of her engines echoed across the battlefield like distant thunder, a promise of fury yet to come. "Hang on, boys," she whispered. "I'm not letting you die here." With that, she pushed the throttle forward, diving back into the storm. The air reeked of smoke and burning fuel. Ash drifted down like snowflakes, stinging the SEALs' eyes as they crouched in the dirt, weapons tight against their chests. The silence after her last strike was deafening. Even the enemy had gone quiet, the fear of that roaring jet hanging over them like a shadow. But silence never lasted long in war. Movement North Ridge, one of the SEALs hissed, pointing toward a flicker of motion through the haze. The commander raised his rifle, squinting through his scope. Figures moved like phantoms, slipping between rocks, darting for cover. Reinforcements. Dozens of them. Here we go again, he muttered under his breath. Stay sharp. Stay alive. Gunfire erupted, breaking the stillness like glass shattering. Bullets hissed past their ears, striking the ruined wall behind them, sending clouds of dust into the air. The SEALs returned fire, but they were running low. Every shot felt precious. Ammo check, the commander shouted. Last mag, one soldier called out. Same here. The commander clenched his jaw. He could feel it. Their line was about to collapse. They were boxed in, hemmed by enemy fire from all sides. High above, she saw too. Her HUD lit up with enemy heat signatures, dozens of them swarming like ants on the move. She exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar thrum of adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She tightened her grip on the controls, banking sharply as the A-10 groaned under the maneuver. Her engines roared like beasts of war, the sound echoing over the canyon as she lined up her next attack. Her thumb hovered over the trigger. Stay low. Her voice crackled over their radios. I've got you covered. The SEALs ducked as her jet dove into view, sunlight flashing off its armor. The sound of her engines sent a ripple of hope through their ranks. Here she comes, one of the men shouted, relief cracking through his fear. The cannon opened fire, the ripping thunder of 30mm shells tearing into enemy positions. The ground shook violently, clouds of dirt and fire exploding in every direction. The SEALs felt the earth quake beneath them, the air vibrating with raw power. Keep your heads down, the commander yelled, shielding his face from the debris. From her cockpit, the battlefield was a blur of dust and flame. She pulled up sharply, banking hard to avoid a ridge, her hands steady on the controls. She'd flown countless missions, but something about this one felt different. These weren't just voices over comms. These were men with names, families, lives she'd sworn to protect. Then her cockpit alarm screamed. A missile lock. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she scanned for the source. A glint of light flashed from a hillside. She had seconds. Missile incoming, she barked into the radio. She yanked the stick, the A-10 jerking violently as she dropped flares. The missile streaked past, close enough that the shockwave rattled her jet. Close one, she muttered through gritted teeth. But she didn't have time to breathe. Another alarm blared. A second missile locked on. Not today, she whispered, banking harder. The jet skimmed so low over the ground that her shadow raced along the rocks beneath her. She hit the flare switch again. The second missile veered away at the last second, detonating in a fiery explosion behind her. The jet shook violently, warning lights flashing red across her console. Engine to damage, she reported calmly, though her pulse pounded in her ears. Still flying, coming back around. On the ground, the SEALs watched in awe as the Warthog roared overhead, smoke trailing from one of its engines. She's hit, a soldier shouted. Doesn't matter, the commander growled, eyes locked on the sky. She's still in the fight. They returned fire, bullets cracking through the air, holding their ground with everything they had left. The enemy was closing in, shouts echoing through the canyon. One SEAL fell back, clutching his shoulder, blood soaking through his sleeve. Medic, someone yelled. Another soldier crawled over, working frantically under fire. The wounded man gritted his teeth, his face pale but determined. I'm fine, he rasped. Just keep shooting. Above, she pushed the jet to its limits, ignoring the alarms screaming in her ears. Her hands moved with precision, adjusting trim and throttle, her breathing steady despite the chaos. She thought of her brother again, of the day they'd buried him, of the flag folded into her mother's trembling hands. That memory burned hotter than fear. She lined up her next shot. Guns hot. The cannon roared again, tearing through enemy reinforcements. Trucks exploded in a chain reaction, flames lighting up the battlefield. The sound was deafening, a ripping growl that sent enemies scattering like startled prey. The SEALs watched in stunned silence, their faces lit by firelight. Hope flickered in their eyes again. "She's incredible," one whispered. The commander allowed himself a small, grim smile. "She's a one-woman army. But even heroes have limits." "Low fuel," she murmured, scanning her gauges. Ammunition was running low too. She had maybe 1 or 2 more passes in her before she'd be forced to pull out. A new alarm blared, a radar lock from another position. She didn't hesitate. She banked sharply, flares streaking behind her. The missile missed, detonating close enough to rattle her teeth. Her voice was calm but clipped as she radioed down. "1 more pass. After that, you're on your own until reinforcements arrive. Make it count." The SEAL commander keyed his mic. "Copy that. We'll hold." His words were steady, but deep down, he knew what that meant. If she didn't take them all out in this last run, they'd be overrun before backup could reach them. She circled high above, the sun glaring off her canopy, the battlefield below a chaotic mess of fire, smoke, and shattered earth. Her eyes narrowed. She had one last chance to change the outcome. "All right, old girl," she whispered to the A-10, patting the throttle. "Let's show them what we're made of." She nosed the jet down, the engine screaming as she dove. The sound echoed through the canyon like thunder rolling across the sky. Enemy gunners scrambled below, their weapons trained upward. She lined up her shot, the targeting reticle glowing red. Guns, guns, guns. The cannon unleashed hell. The ground erupted, shock waves rippling through the air. Flames roared, smoke billowed, and the earth itself seemed to tremble under the barrage. From below, the SEALs shielded their faces, the heat and noise overwhelming. When they finally dared to look, enemy forces were in full retreat, their vehicles destroyed, their strongholds obliterated. "She did it," someone whispered. But then they saw it, smoke pouring from her engine, flames licking at her wing. The A-10 wobbled in the air, alarms blaring over their comms. "She's hit," the commander shouted. "Mayday, mayday." Her voice crackled through their headsets, calm but strained. "Engine failure. Trying to stay airborne." The SEALs stared at the sky, horror gripping their chests. The angel in the clouds was falling. The sky was no longer her sanctuary, it was her enemy. The A-10 shuddered violently as alarms wailed in her helmet, a high-pitched shriek that drilled into her ears. Red lights flashed across her console. Right engine failure. Hydraulic pressure low, fire detected. The calm, automated voice repeated the warnings like a countdown to her death. Her hands moved instinctively, flipping switches, killing the fire suppression system, forcing the jet to respond. The Warthog was built like a tank. It could take punishment most planes couldn't survive, but this was pushing even its limits. "Stay with me, old girl," she muttered through clenched teeth. Sweat dripped down her face as she wrestled the controls. Down below, the SEAL team scrambled for cover as debris rained from the sky. The commander pressed a hand to his earpiece, listening to her frantic updates through the chaos. "She's losing altitude," he barked to his men. "She's coming down." One of his soldiers scanned the sky, heart hammering. "We need to find where she lands. Now." "She won't survive without us," the commander said, already moving. They sprinted through the smoke and dust, weaving through shattered stone walls and burning vehicles. Gunfire still cracked in the distance, stragglers, enemies who hadn't fled. The team returned fire, pushing forward. Every man knew it wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about getting to her before the enemy did. In the cockpit, she gritted her teeth and adjusted her course. The controls were sluggish, fighting her every move. The smell of burning metal filled the cabin, acrid and suffocating. "Okay," she whispered, voice trembling but calm. "Find a spot, level out, come on." Her eyes scanned the landscape below, rocky terrain, a few dirt clearings, none of them ideal. The jet dipped lower, her altitude warning screaming at her. She cut power to the failing engine, her hand steady despite the chaos. Too high to eject, too low to bail. She was going to have to put this beast down herself. The SEAL commander stopped at a ridge, dropping to one knee as he raised his binoculars. In the distance, he saw her jet trailing black smoke, gliding low over the horizon. It was losing altitude fast. "There!" he shouted, pointing. 2 clicks east. "Move!" The team charged through the broken landscape, every step a gamble as bullets zipped past them. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. She had saved their lives. Now it was their turn. Inside the cockpit, the vibrations intensified. Every second was a battle between her training and fear. She thought of her brother, of his last letter to her, before he deployed, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Don't stop fighting for people like me." That letter was tucked inside her flight suit, over her heart. She touched it with one gloved hand, steadying herself. "I'm not done yet," she whispered. Her training kicked in. She adjusted flaps, throttled down her good engine, and angled for the clearing she'd spotted. The ground rushed up to meet her, the sun glaring through the cracked canopy. She leveled the wings at the last second. The sound of impact roared like thunder. The A-10 slammed into the dirt, skidding across the clearing in a cloud of dust and sparks. Metal screamed as it tore through the ground, flames licking at the fuselage. The cockpit shook violently, her body straining against the harness. Hold on," she muttered, teeth gritted. The jet finally groaned to a halt, its nose buried in the dirt, one wing bent and smoking. She hung in her harness for a moment, dazed, ears ringing from the impact. Then she smelled it. Fuel. She snapped back to reality, fumbling at her harness, coughing as smoke filled the cockpit. Come on," she growled, hitting the release. She dropped hard to the floor, pain shooting up her side. No time to think. She crawled toward the shattered canopy, pulling herself through broken glass as flames licked closer. The SEALs crested a hill just in time to see the jet go down. The explosion of dirt and sparks made them stop in their tracks for a split second. "She's down," a soldier shouted. "Go. Move," the commander barked. They sprinted toward the clearing, their boots pounding the cracked earth. Bullets kicked up dust at their heels, enemy fire. The opposition had spotted her crash, and they were closing in too. "Contact 3 o'clock," another SEAL yelled, firing back. The commander swore under his breath. "Split. 2 men cover fire. Rest on me. We get to her first." She dragged herself out of the cockpit, collapsing into the dirt. The world spun, her lungs burning as smoke curled from the wreckage behind her. Her helmet was cracked, her uniform scorched. She staggered to her knees, clutching her side. A sharp crack of gunfire made her flinch. She turned her head, spotting figures in the distance. Not friendly. They were coming fast. She reached for her sidearm, her hands shaking. "Not like this," she whispered, forcing herself to her feet. The SEAL commander's voice cut through the chaos over the radio. "Hog 1, hold position. We're coming for you." She exhaled sharply, clutching her pistol. Relief surged through her chest, but fear still clawed at her gut. The enemy was close. Too close. The first group of fighters appeared over a dune, rifles raised. She fired back, taking cover behind the wreckage. Bullets whizzed past her head, striking sparks off the broken jet. Her hands trembled as she reloaded. She'd flown countless missions, survived missile strikes, near-death dives. But now, alone in the dirt, she felt more vulnerable than ever. The SEALs burst into the clearing moments later, opening fire. The commander led the charge, his voice hoarse but commanding. "Get her out of there." She saw them through the smoke, shadows moving fast, precise, deadly. A wave of relief washed over her, but she didn't stop shooting. The air filled with the deafening crack of gunfire as they engaged the enemy. A soldier skidded to her side, grabbing her arm. "Ma'am, we've got you." "Not leaving without my bird," she coughed, glancing at the flaming wreck. "Ma'am, she's gone," he shouted over the chaos. The commander reached them, crouching low. "We don't have time. Reinforcements are on the way, move." She hesitated for a heartbeat, staring at the jet that had carried her through hell. Then she nodded, letting them pull her to her feet. They sprinted back toward cover, bullets snapping past them. Explosions rocked the ground behind them as enemy mortars began to rain down on the crash site. The heat of the burning jet seared her back as they ran. She stumbled once, pain lancing through her ribs, but the commander grabbed her, dragging her forward. "Stay with us," he barked. "I'm fine," she gasped, her voice strained. "Just keep moving." They dove behind a ridge as enemy fire intensified. The clearing where her jet had crashed was now engulfed in flames, smoke billowing into the sky like a signal flare. The enemy would know exactly where they were. "We've got to move," the commander said, scanning the horizon. "Reinforcements will be here soon, but we've got to hold out until then." She sat slumped against a rock, her breaths ragged. "I can fight," she said through gritted teeth, pulling her pistol again. The commander gave her a grim smile. "I don't doubt it." And so they dug in, forming a defensive perimeter around her. The sun dipped low in the sky, painting the battlefield red. Shadows stretched long as the enemy regrouped, preparing for another push. She stared at the flames in the distance, her beloved A-10 reduced to smoldering wreckage. A pang of grief twisted in her chest, but she shoved it down. There wasn't time for that. "Looks like I'm staying on the ground tonight," she said with a dry chuckle, wiping blood from her lip. The commander glanced at her, respect shining in his eyes. "Ma'am, you've already done more than enough." She shook her head, cocking her pistol. "Not yet." In the distance, a horn blew, a signal. The enemy was advancing. The ground trembled as trucks and boots approached, the sound growing louder. The commander tightened his grip on his rifle. "Here they come." She straightened, wincing at the pain, but refusing to sit still. "Then let's make them regret it." The sun sank lower, the horizon bleeding orange and gold. Shadows danced across their faces as they prepared for the final stand. The battlefield, littered with fire and smoke, felt like the edge of the world. And for a moment, everything went silent. Then came the roar of engines. The roar of engines grew louder, rumbling across the desert like distant thunder. At first, the SEALs thought it was another wave of enemy reinforcements, but then came the crackle of friendly comms in their earpieces. "Guardian flight inbound. Hold your positions." The commander's lips curved into the first real smile of the day. "Backup's here." The battered team ducked behind rocks and shattered concrete as the sky erupted. Helicopters swooped in low, rotors chopping the air like blades, their spotlights slicing through the smoke. The distant boom of artillery fire followed, striking enemy positions. She tilted her head back, eyes narrowing at the sight of the incoming support. Her body ached, her ribs screamed with every breath, but a small wave of relief washed over her. "Took you long enough," she whispered hoarsely, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The commander crouched beside her, hand resting on her shoulder. "You kept us alive until they got here," he said firmly. "They wouldn't even have found us if it weren't for you." She gave a faint smile, though her eyes stayed sharp, scanning the horizon. "Still work to do," she said, reloading her pistol with shaking hands. The enemy, though scattered, wasn't finished. Shadows moved through the smoke, rifles raised. The SEALs opened fire, the sound of their rifles joining the thunder of helicopters above. Explosions lit up the battlefield, flames reflecting in her cracked visor. "Stay low," the commander barked, pulling her down as a burst of gunfire sprayed over their heads. "Not planning on standing up?" she gritted out, crawling to a better firing position. Suddenly, the clearing erupted in chaos. A truck full of enemy fighters burst through the smoke, its mounted gun blazing. The SEALs scattered, returning fire. The commander grabbed her arm, pulling her back as bullets ripped through the dirt where she'd been seconds before. "Cover me," one soldier shouted, launching a grenade. The explosion flipped the truck in a ball of fire, scattering its crew. The air filled with shouts and gunfire, every second a fight for survival. She stayed low, breath coming in sharp bursts, her side throbbing with pain. But her eyes stayed focused. She couldn't stop now. She wouldn't. Overhead, the incoming jets made their presence known. A deafening roar split the sky, followed by a thunderous barrage of firepower. The desert floor shook as enemy positions were obliterated. The tide was turning. The SEAL commander looked back at her, awe and gratitude in his eyes. "You bought us this time. You saved us." She shook her head, lips pressed into a thin line. "We saved each other," she whispered. Within minutes, the battlefield shifted. The enemy broke and ran, their vehicles abandoned, their shouts fading into the distance. The helicopters descended, kicking up whirlwinds of dust as medics and reinforcements poured out. The SEALs stood, wounded, dirty, exhausted, but alive. Every single one of them. 2 medics rushed to her side, lowering her onto a stretcher despite her protests. "I can walk," she said stubbornly, trying to push herself up. The commander knelt beside her, his hand gently pushing her shoulder back down. "You've done enough for a lifetime," he said, voice steady but soft. She finally let herself relax, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her gaze flicked to the smoldering wreck of her A-10 in the distance, black smoke still curling into the sky. "She brought me home," she murmured, almost to herself. "She always does." As they carried her toward the waiting helicopter, the SEAL team lined up, battered and bloodied, and gave her a silent salute. Not the kind of salute given out of protocol, but the kind given from one warrior to another. Earned, not demanded. She blinked against the sunlight, emotion tightening her throat. "I was just doing my job," she muttered, embarrassed by the attention. "Your job," one of the younger SEALs said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You didn't just do your job. You saved every single one of us." The helicopter lifted off, and she watched the battlefield shrink beneath her. Smoke curled like ghosts from burning vehicles, the desert littered with the wreckage of a fight they weren't supposed to survive. The commander leaned closer, voice low so only she could hear. "We were dead men walking before you showed up. If you hadn't, we'd just be names on a wall." She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She wanted to say something, anything, but all she could manage was a tired nod. Hours later, the team was safe at a forward operating base. She sat propped up on a cot, her ribs bandaged, her face streaked with grime. The SEAL commander stepped into the tent, hands behind his back. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Always," she said softly. He pulled something from his pocket, a patch, worn and dirt-stained, bearing the SEAL insignia. "The men wanted you to have this," he said, handing it to her. She took it with trembling hands, running her fingers over the fabric. Her eyes stung, but she blinked back the tears. "I'm not one of you," she whispered. "You are now," he said simply. Outside, the sky glowed with the soft light of dawn. The sounds of war were distant now, replaced by the soft hum of generators and the quiet voices of soldiers finally at rest. She looked down at the patch in her hand, then out at the horizon. She thought of her brother. She thought of every soldier who never made it home. And she thought of the men alive today because she'd chosen to dive again and again into hell. Her plane was gone, but her resolve burned brighter than ever. The commander paused at the door, glancing back at her. "You know, when you came over the ridge, we thought you were an angel." She chuckled softly, leaning her head back against the cot. "Angels don't fly A-10s," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Guess they do now." That night, as the stars stretched over the silent desert, the SEALs told the story of the woman who'd saved them, how she came out of the sun like a guardian, her jet screaming like thunder, and turned their battlefield into fire. And somewhere deep down, she knew it was true. Heroes don't fly alone. They carry every life they save with them. Now, as a viewer, you can't help but ask yourself, would I have the courage to fly into hell for strangers and never look back? What would you do if you were in her place, flying into danger with lives on the line? Stories like this remind us of the courage and sacrifice of those who protect us every single day. If this story moved you, hit that like button to show your support for real-life heroes. Subscribe to join our community of storytellers and never miss another powerful story like this one. And most importantly, share your thoughts below. Could you be that brave? Or do you know someone who inspires you the same way? Let's honor them together.